Hello, I'm Annie Sloan.
And I'm Tristan Merriam.
And this is The Colourist,
a podcast all about colour and its influence on our lives. So this is part 2 of our discussions on Swedish and Gustavian influence on the world of paints and interiors. And today we're honing in on a colour, a specific colour, Scandinavian Pink, which is one of the chalk paint colours. So Annie, we teased a little bit about this in the previous episode on Oberson Blue, but what is this episode going to be about?
Well, I think it's going to be much more about the average house, the normal people. It's not the fancy houses. It's a bit more, there were sort of people with money, but not fabulously rich. And Scandinavian Pink, I think, sort of epitomises it.
Brilliant. So before we get down to Scandinavian Pink, we've got to build up to this. And there's a colour that I think we mentioned in the previous episode called Falun Red. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I have no idea.
Falun. Falun Red. So I find this fascinating because this colour was a byproduct of the copper mining, which we discussed. Almost like an accidental success. This amazing, well, sort of worldwide, I'll come on to that, this thing happened as a byproduct. So educate us, tell us more about this. When did this colour come about? And tell us more about how it came about.
I believe it was, they would have been doing a lot of copper mining, whatever they did, what copper smelting, whatever, in the 17th and 18th century. And they began to use it because they painted the outside of their houses to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so if you go today to Finland, Sweden, Norway and Denmark, the whole Nordic culture, you will find they have these amazing red houses. They're everywhere. I haven't been to Norway, but I have been to Sweden and the others, and I was amazed that there were just so many houses in the countryside painted this beautiful red. And when I went there, I went, oh, hang on, that's what I've seen in North America, in upstate New York, Connecticut and Massachusetts, these red houses. And it's the same red and the same type of building, big barns, often with big circular windows, and it's just exactly the same. So I realised that this red is the same red, or similar anyway, in that they were copying it. But these were the immigrants that come from Sweden, the big immigration in I think it was the 18th century, when Sweden got a little poorer after being fabulously rich. And so they all came to America and set up in their own little Swedish houses.
And they brought with them their colour, their thing that they were known for, which I find really exciting.
It's fabulous.
And lovely.
Yeah. There's a whole Pennsylvania Dutch thing in North America as well, which is slightly bigger than, it's more not just Swedish. But anyway, so we returned to Sweden.
Yeah, amazing. But was it in America that you first came across this colour? It's hard to remember.
Well, it would have been, because I would have seen pictures. I knew about the pictures and the painted furniture tradition in America. Uh-huh. And it wasn't until probably a bit later, not that long later, that I realised the connection. Mm-hmm. And then I got really, really, really into the Swedish thing.
And and back to where it came from, really which is important to acknowledge that.
Yes, very much. And I think that although it was important in America, I think what you see, the original bits of it, are just so extraordinary and so gorgeous.
So it was born through... It was used initially very practically, I suppose. It was this product, there was lots of it, it was abundant, it was cheap, and therefore people painted their houses in it.
Yes.
And at the time, that was to protect the wood.
Well, yes, because paint, if you've got wood, you need to protect it. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that. But what they did, which I think is fantastic, and I think you can still buy this particular paint in Sweden, it was a cooked paint. So into this red pigment, or rather the pigment was added to a sort of, well, I used to think it was oats, but I may not be right about oats, but it was certainly a sort of rye flour. So they cooked rye flour and the pigment, and I think linseed oil, that would be the sealer and the carrier. And that would have, we talked about earlier, that would have dried very hard and very strong, like we know with porridge and with our Weetabix.
With Weetabix. So it needed to be strong because it was going on the outside of buildings and it was open to quite extreme weather, I suppose, in that part of the world.
Yep, definitely.
But likening it to Weetabix is really good. I think there's a
porridge in my house.
Porridge.
Yeah,
well, if anyone from Porridge or Weetabix is listening and they fancy a chalk paint collaboration, you could have a colour called Weetabix. That wouldn't be a great colour, would it? Anyway, we're digressing. But it was practical, but beautiful.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, what would have happened? They would have started to paint the outsides of the window frames, and then they would have gone the front door, and then that would have gone onto some furniture. And I've got some left over. What should we do? Let's get rid of the rye flour. Let's just use it as a paint. And so I think they would have, as a colour rather. And so they would have made several types of paint. One was an egg paint. So they would have added to the egg yolk to make egg tempera. And then they would have also added it to a very simple paint, not unlike my paint. So they would have had some very simple things in it. A glue, probably horse bones or whatever.
Cow bones. You don't have any horse bones in your paint?
I certainly do not. No. No animals were harmed in the making of my paint.
No.
So they had this very chalky paint that they used for the inside, and they started painting lots of images and patterns. And I can't wait to tell you who did these.
And we touched upon this in the previous episode of the quality of the paint. When you were actually lucky enough to sort of see some of these original pieces, you felt the paint, and that also inspired the way your paint is made, not just the colours.
Yeah.
But wasn't your first shop, drawing on the sort of practical element as well as the beauty, what was your first shop called?
It was called Practical Style.
So this is something that's very close to your heart.
It is, because I am a very practical person, but I'm also, I like things to have meaning.
But you're also a very beautiful person. Is that what you were going to say?
I was going to say, no.
I think you should. I'm practical and beautiful.
I was going to say lyrical.
Lyrical, even better.
And fancy, and sort of, I love sort of fancy ideas. But I think practicality and meaning is so important, and that's what I think is.
And
fabulous.
that runs throughout your business.
Yeah, it does.
It's meant to be
taking old
practical.
Furniture and transforming it so it can be used again. Mm-hmm. So I love all that. Yeah, it's brilliant, and meaning.
It does. And so that's how this colour came about, being used on the outside of houses. Yeah. So if we now step inside into the interiors, and specifically in Sweden, where and how did you first see the Scandinavian Pink equivalent being used? So obviously Scandinavian Pink is the name of your colour.
I called it Scandinavian because I realise it's not just Sweden, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. Although my first inspiration was from someone called Carl Larsson, who's actually 19th century. People might know those pictures. They're pictures of family life. He's an illustrator, and there's just beautiful family stories of the interior and with his children. Someone could be washing their hair, but in the background is these amazing rooms, and we'll put something so everyone can see. And there were details, and there would always be this extraordinary pink, which I love. Pink is one of my favourite colours, but it's I love that sort of dirty pink. And this is a dirty pink, but it's quite bright. It's an earthy pink, but it's quite vibrant. So I really like
orange?
it.
Yes,
there's a bit of orange in it. So where it sits on the colour wheel is between Emperor's Silk and Bright Orange, and it goes towards the oranges. So when I say that blue is opposite to Barcelona orange, or any blue is opposite to Barcelona orange, it particularly works well with the greener side of the blue and the more reddy side of the orange. Yeah. And that is where Scandinavian Pink.
And Oberson Blue.
And I just think that's amazing because they are actually, they are complementaries, really good complementaries. That sort of thing gets me buzzing because I think that is amazing because I'm putting that on it up. That's the intellectualization of it. It is actually, they are complementaries, and that's why it works. Anyway. So that's where Scandinavian Pink works. It's slightly orangey, but not obviously orangey.
So it's different to Fallon Red. Fallon Red's much stronger. It's much more red.
Yeah.
And now, as we've moved into the interiors of these houses, which we'll come on to in big time in a second, it's much pinkier. Is that just... I just think they added took the white. Colour and added whites? Yeah,
that's all it would be. And there would also be different parts of where they made it. I don't suppose these were big factories. They were probably local people making this Fallon Red. And so this red would have been slightly different places. So sometimes it'd be a bit more browny, some bit more red. I don't know.
Oh, that's it. Regionally, it would change.
Regionally, and I think then the whites would have been different. When you add the white, you get a different pink. Basically.
And would that have been to make it cheaper? Or just...
adding the white?
Yeah.
No, I just think to add colour.
Just to change the colour?
Yeah. I mean, you could just... because otherwise you've just got quite a reddy colour. Where do you can't use too much of that. Whereas you can make really pale, pinks, which would be gorgeous. And you do see those in some of the grander houses. More delicate colours. But in the farmers' places, or these, I suppose, middle class families, I suppose. I don't know. You do see the dark brown. So I've got some lovely photographs we can show to show everybody on my Instagram page or on. I think we're going to do a YouTube. Vinny, are we doing a YouTube page?
We'll be putting them on YouTube, yes.
Yes, so you'll be able to see that.
Visual as well.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be important. So, so I think they would have changed. There would have been all sorts of. So you can see some of these: the brown, the pink,
the blue,
the red, the blue, all of those colours.
So we're building up now to talking about these incredible rooms and this amazing way of painting.
Yeah.
That people might find it hard to imagine. So we're going to do our best to describe this, but as you say, we're going to get the images out there. But there might be some way of kind of making listeners identify with this. You might have seen it before with something called Dala Horses. So you might not know about the rooms we're going to talk about, but you might have seen these Dala horses, which are very much a symbol of Sweden in general, and Dalarna, is that the correct pronunciation? And so that's the colour and also the folky style. Yeah. So do you want to explain a little bit about the Dala horses before we then talk about the rooms?
Well, like you say, it's a symbol of Sweden. You get these lovely sort of blocky type horses. They're a little bit like a rocking horse. And they're quite blocky and they're really lovely. They often have on the backs of them some sort of flowery design, quite folky. And they're always painted some sort of red, pinky or orangey, all different sorts of reds. I've seen loads of different ones. And they are, often given as toys to children or just as somebody who's Swedish background, they will often have one of these wonderful horses. So that is, they came originally from Dalarna, and they're called Dala Horses, and they're painted in Fallon Red.
There we go.
There we are, the whole story.
And we now are getting to these rooms, these amazing rooms, which we're going to spend a long time talking about, because you've said they're a huge inspiration to you. They were and are a huge inspiration to you in the early stages of developing the business, and also right through to today. So tell us about these rooms. You call them celebration rooms. They've got a...
Wait, I want to start this.
Okay.
I don't want to say what they call... What I want to say, because I think it's magical, that there were travelling painters. Right. Don't you think that's amazing?
I do. But what is a travelling painter?
Well, they were... I don't really know what they were, but they were guys that travelled around, probably always guys, and they would travel around from house to house and knock on the door and say, do you want your room painted?
Like, do you want your windows cleaning, love?
And they'd negotiate to have a room painted. So there were itinerant painters. And actually that idea went to America as well. So those early Americans were decorated by itinerant painters.
I think it's fascinating, actually.
Me too.
That these people went around the world, the country, wherever, painting people's rooms. How long do you imagine they stayed? Obviously, it depends on the room and the design, but it wasn't a day job.
No, they would stay with the family. They would be fed by the family, and presumably they were given some money to. You'd
hope so, or maybe just bed and board.
Bed and board. No, they'd have to be given.
Must be, yeah.
So I don't know whether they were on their own or there were several of them who did it. I don't really know much about it. If anybody knows, I'd love to know a little bit more about it.
But they were called itinerant.
Itinerant, just
painters.
meaning travelling painters. And
what a fantastic idea.
I mean,
we could bring that one back.
Should we do that?
I'd love to. Yeah.
Well, you do it a bit. You go around teaching.
Yes, I know.
I've done the same. I've gone around teaching, but I haven't gone around. I did do a lot of murals.
I was going to say, it's sort of like commissions.
Yeah,
sort of.
But you don't stay with the people and all the rest of it. So this was a whole industry. And so, but what you would do, so you have to imagine these houses were quite big. Apparently at that point, space wasn't the problem. Money to build a big house was good because it meant you're rich, you looked good, but they often didn't have enough activities for the rooms. So they'd have these rooms. So they would make their best room. They were often called a feast room.
Right. Feaster rooms. Okay.
And I also call them celebration rooms, but that's my word, because they were decorated in ways which were a celebration or a feast where you would have something going on. And so there would be, for marriages, these rooms, marriages, possibly christening, certainly, possibly birthdays, Christmas, probably lots of Christian events as well, like Easter and maybe other ones. So lots of things, probably even funerals as well.
So very much linked to that family. It was personalised to their own family and their story.
Yes.
Which sounds a bit cheesy, but it's true.
And they're so beautiful. Some of them are quite serious. We've looked at some. We thought, I don't know whether we'd be happy in that room because it's quite
full on.
Moral.
Yes, I was going to ask. There was an element of storytelling, as we've just said, but there was also a very religious element to them.
Sometimes there was.
And a moral element.
Yes. So this is, I think they were Lutheran, so they would be quite strict, and there wasn't. I don't think there was. I don't know. I was going to say they would be quite serious and not a lot of joy, but then you look at the rooms and they are full of joy. Some of the rooms are quite dark and stark, but anyway,
they're not the ones we like.
They're not the ones.
No.
There is a lot about. There's one of the themes could be like the 7 ages of man, reminding us that, we're born, we're little, and then we become adolescents and then adults and the 7 ages, and then you end up almost the same size as you were when you came in.
So
all
quite
bent up
grounding.
and very grounding.
Yeah.
It's very Lutheran, isn't it? It's very, don't get above yourself.
No.
Remember that you are, feet on the ground. Remember that God's above you, basically. Anyway, I love the drawings. They're beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And I want you to really explain these. Obviously, if you're listening to this, Google it.
Yes.
Obviously.
And we'll show you.
And we'll show you. But describe these rooms because they have to be seen to be believed.
Yes. Well, then you could have a whole room with there'd be a dado, and then around it would be scenes, often Bible stories, and there would be little houses, people, horses, and across the top and below there would also be patterns. So sort of stencil or folk art patterns were really lovely. Now, I know that lots of them got designs of these painters would get these designs. You remember there weren't books around. You couldn't put Instagram and find your pictures.
Pinterest.
Or Pinterest.
No.
You couldn't do
And when are we
any of that.
talking here? What period of time are we
it's
in?
late 18th, early 19th century.
Definitely wasn't Pinterest.
So there were.
I don't think even Instagram was around then.
No, not even Instagram, no. And there'd be very few books around. So what did they do? They would have seen what they could see, which would be religious tracts, and there was a Bible, and these were illustrated. So they would take some of the imagery that they saw in the woodcuts in these books and translate them into painting. These are not, I would imagine, these painters are not highly trained. They were, your bloke who was quite good at art,
Who could copy,
and wasn't trained. And so they've got a beautiful naivety about them. Sometimes they're not quite in proportion, but they're all gorgeous. Limited palette, which we've talked about before, which I think is stunning.
So we've covered Aubusson. That was our previous episode, and that is one of the limited palette colours. We've got this Scandinavian Pink, if you like, which obviously wasn't called that. And what's the other colour that really stands out? There was obviously a few neutrals.
There's some neutrals,
there was one other colour,
sort of country greys, and then also a Paris grey, which is why I called it Paris, because it was French, but it's used in Sweden a lot. And then there was a brown. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking of Chateau Grey.
Chateau Grey. There's a lot of Chateau Grey.
When you look at these photos, these images and so on, they are the three colours that stand out to me. And one of them is definitely Chateau Grey, which is like a green.
It's a sort of dirty green, which is lovely, and it works so well because you've then, these three neutrals are the Paris, country and chateau look very nice and soft with accompanying the deeper blue or the paler blue or the pink.
And why were there why were there three main colours at the time?
Well, I would imagine it was to do with what was available, and there wasn't anything else. There was, what I'm interested in, you don't see much yellow. And I would have thought yellow would be available because yellow earth, but maybe Sweden didn't have any yellow earth.
No, but part of the reason I love looking at these images is because they are so decorative.
Yeah.
And it really it's a creative way of doing a room, if you like. And that's where I think it links to the Bloomsbury style and Charleston Farmhouse, which we keep touching upon.
And what we should say is it wasn't just religious stories.
No.
So some of them are quite, are very strongly a moral story that you should remember. But some of them were... it's just a bit lighter, so it could be bunches of flowers, circles, leaves, trees, and quite beautiful and light. My favourite room, and I haven't told you where I've seen a lot of these things, is somewhere called Skansen in Stockholm. It's an open-air museum, and they have brought all the old painted houses from the countryside that probably would have rotted away. They brought them into Skansen and they've erected them there. And it's a bit like a small village. It's amazing. So I would urge anybody that's going to go to Stockholm. I mean,
I was going to say, where can you go and see these today? Obviously, there's books and there's the internet. There's Pinterest and Instagram. But if you want to go and see these, that's the place to go.
It absolutely is. My favourite, well, I can't say it's my favourite, but it's one that I've loved. I love seeing it in Skansen, was this room. It was a house, but in it was this room. It was pitched roof, pitched ceiling. And at the end was this lovely wreath, simple wreath. And it says Michael and Maria. And the date, which is 1690, something like that. And in the ceiling are just beautiful, very softly coloured flowers and birds, different sorts of birds. It's so, so pretty. And I assume this was their marriage.
A love story.
It's a love story. It really, literally is a love story. And I imagine they had their wedding there. I mean, you could have everything there because you could have had your wedding, you could have had christenings, you could have everything. It would all be in this beautiful surrounding. And there's a beautiful light. They have gorgeous lights as well, sort of chandeliers, but very simple wooden chandeliers. And so that's one. And then they outside that room, I think there was some marbling, and their marbling is like someone's marbled this. They've never seen marbling. They just know there are lines all over it. They're beautiful.
Well, when I saw this picture, I thought that's not a marbling, but it's their interpretation of it, or imagination.
Yeah. So it's really lovely, and there were bits of pink in there. There's pink everywhere. And so I just love the way this pink keeps popping up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the storytelling element. I think that's something that really appeals to me. And it takes the phrase make a house a home so much further. That is really celebrating your life, your family, your love, whatever it might be, and really making your home reflect that, which I love.
I think that's really, really true. People, the only times we do it now are do it onto toy boxes or a children's chair.
Yes.
But God, wouldn't
Why
it be
is it limited to children?
I know.
Come on,
they
adults.
get all the luck.
So there's all of these amazing places, Skansen specifically.
Yeah.
It really inspired you to create a colour, Scandinavian Pink.
Yes. Yeah.
So tell us about that colour. What's it like as a colour for someone who's never seen it or used it? And what colours does it work well with?
Yeah. Well, I've said that it was where it lies on the colour circle, so it's nearer to the orangey part. Its complementary is blue, a greeny blue. It works beautifully with that. All the pale blues, the greys, all of those colours. And it's an earthy colour, and that's really appeals to me, really. And you can add more white to it. And it would also work with my other colours, which are primer red. And that's a nice combo. You can get some nice warm ones. Or a little bit of sort of, you could do all and soften it and make all of those work together. And that would give a good Scandinavian look. And I say Scandinavian, but actually you could use that and do it in a completely different design. No one would know. It doesn't matter. Those colours work together. It isn't that Scandinavian Pink is only for Swedish design. I can see it in many types of rooms. People have used it lots and lots.
And how are we still we are, you and me, we are inspired by this style of painting and these decorative finishes, these stencil shapes, the folkiness of it, the pattern. We're very inspired by that. But how generally are we still inspired in the 21st century with this style, do you think? Because we've spoken about the very ornate rooms, the very decorative rooms, but there were much more simple designs as well, with lines and
these houses.
Borders.
The borders were mainly in the grand houses. I think what we're talking about is much more the ones that I really like. I love them all. But the country houses, the farmers' houses, it could just be, a very lovely room that I've seen, which I saw in Skansen, was the bottom half was a sort of chateau grey. Actually, no, it was not. It went up. It's when you've got a picture rail. So the picture rail came down, and I think that was a white or an off-white. You had below that a chateau grey sort of colour. Goes a bit olivey sometimes. And then along it was just a line of Scandinavian Pink. Now, this was not a flat wall. It was a wall made of wooden, what do you call it when you have panels? What's that called? Anyway, not panels.
Cladding. There we go.
Just wood. Thank you, Vincent. I knew Vincent would be useful for something.
Very useful.
So there's wood, and so you've got a line on the wood, and then there's a little bit of
I know exactly
bit
what you're
of beading
say
down the side.
Yeah.
and then it looked like a little dot on it. And so it goes along. We'll put those in the photographs as well.
Yes, because they've basically come across the gaps in the cladding where the line would go all wonky and funny.
Yes.
And they've just stopped the line, done a dot, and carried on the line, done a dot. And I know exactly what you mean.
Really
very
lovely.
inspiring.
Very inspiring. And there are so many simple things like that, which I think is not just about the colour. You could do the technique as well. And actually, we concentrate a lot on walls here, but in fact, there's a huge amount of painted furniture. Some of the Swedish painted furniture, you sort of do need a really lovely piece of Swedish design. And that is not always easy to find. Very difficult to find, in fact. They're very solid and quite small quite often, but beautiful. 4-poster beds and simple tables. I think that's the sort of general thing that...
I'd say we're probably, in my opinion, more influenced today in our furniture from these sort of storytelling, folksy style of painting. You see that much more on furniture than you do on walls. You don't go to many people's houses and find that they've painted scenes on the walls and done decorative finishes all over the walls in terms of flowers and, biblical messages, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's more furniture.
Yes.
Do you think people don't like that? Do you think it's a fear of doing things sort of with permanence on the walls? Do you think it's a lack of skill?
I think it's all those things. But, nowadays we move house all the time. Yeah. Those people would be stuck in that house forever. And it was probably their parents' and their grandparents' house. So it would go on. And
they were building that storyline.
Yeah.
That timeline of their family tree almost. Yeah. Potentially.
And they probably didn't have a lot more. We can go down to IKEA or whatever and buy some pictures. They didn't have that. They had to decorate it all themselves. And I know I love to be able to go and buy stuff I like, but really what would be wonderful is that you had to make everything your own. I would love that.
Well, I suppose we've got wallpapers now, haven't we, as well?
Yeah.
So they wanted pattern on the wall and interest and all those things, not just a colour. So they painted them, whereas now...
That reminds me of the fact that they would get canvas. So you can get sheeting or a linen, paint it and stick it onto the wall. Not stick it, but you can... I've done it they use tacks, I think. But we could use a staple gun. Mm-hmm. I've done that. And I think that's fabulous.
Good for rentals. So you're sort of not damaging the walls. You're just kind of changing them without...
And that reminds me also of a print room. We were talking about that earlier because I was talking about how I'd been to this very beautiful house, which was actually quite a grand house in Sweden. And in one of the rooms were... it was a greeny wall, I can't remember, but they'd found little pictures, little prints, and they'd actually no, they didn't. They pinned them to the wall.
Yes, I loved this image.
And then they drew around them with frames around them. And I did something similar. It's long gone now, but I would love to recreate that somewhere.
I've seen a lot of this on social media and Instagram recently of people painting frames around frames or around pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
And I think that is definitely something that's taken from this idea.
Yeah.
Whether people know it or not.
Yes. And then there was a border, and I think it was all done on fabric. I can't remember. And what was interesting, that was done by the lady of the house, because often we were talking about these amazing itinerant painters that would come around and do your painting for you. But there were also, this was a woman, and she decorated this house herself, this particular room with prints.
Amazing.
It is. It's amazing.
So we're in your what would you call it? Your living room?
Yeah.
In Oxford, at your home. What if we look around this room? Are there any influences of Swedish style and these sorts of rooms that are?
You put me on the spot.
I know. I just thought of that question.
Well, the only thing I can see is above here. I've got Cambrian blue on the wall, and then a shelf, and above that, I've painted it with Barcelona orange, which I love. I should really what I do intend to do, but I don't have the time, is to do some lines, because I do lines. It's my passion. Don't do enough of them. And you could do those with masking tape.
I've just noticed. So this little sort of sliver of orange only goes across one wall, the window wall.
Yes.
And it's just above the shelves.
Yeah.
And I haven't noticed that, actually.
And if you look underneath it is a Barcelona orange table.
So it balances.
Which sort of balances it. And I get a lot of joy out of looking at that. It's a bit of a mess at the moment, but it is great. And that orange was done a long time ago. And that's something people often ask me, how long does your paint last? I'm like, well, that is really old.
It's Weetabix paint, isn't it?
That is Weetabix.
It sticks. But I think people can be much more expressive and decorative with their wall design.
Yeah.
We know furniture. We could. There's people are brave with furniture.
Yeah.
But in terms of walls, and as you say, lines,
and around
patterns,
doors,
colours, doors. I mean, I was looking at home last night in our living room, and I want to paint. We have a picture rail, and above the picture rail is graphite, and below the picture rail is Doric, which is like a sort of pale grey, I suppose. Yeah. And it just needs a bit of
something.
And I'm thinking, directly below the picture rail, what can I do around the whole room? Could I do like a scallop or a pattern or some sort of repeated something to bring another colour up there?
Yeah, nice.
But I think more people should look at their rooms in that creative way.
Well, if you do it, everybody will do it. You see, that's the thing. I think, that's something. If you don't do it, other people...
Well, you don't see much of it, do you, in interiors? Not much.
No.
Most
and it's a
people's houses
cheap way to
not
decorate.
Like that. It is.
Way to if you get rid of it, if you don't like it.
Exactly.
I think what is important is what we're doing now is looking at pictures and going, this is fabulous. Oh, I like that. And being inspired, and you can do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's the enjoyment of doing it.
So enjoyable. And it is making a house a home. Even more so. Furniture can go with you and change, but your walls, there's something really exciting about putting more creativity onto your walls. I find that inspiring.
And more colour on your walls, which leads us on to
I was about to ask. So we've spoken about this subject of Sweden, Aubusson blue, Scandinavian pink, touched on Chateau Grey as one of those colours. Where do we go next? What is our next episode going to be about?
Well, I could have talked about Sweden forever, but we decided that we might come back to it in a different way sometime in the future. But for now, there's a link which is neoclassical. So we haven't really talked about much, but the Swedish thing, particularly the Gustavian, it was quite neoclassical. And neoclassical, I will explain what all that means in the next episode, which is going to concentrate on a particular man, and he was called Schinkel, and he was brilliant at colour. He was German, in fact, but he was neoclassical, and I think we will knock your socks off.
I mean, you will. I've seen the photos because we were speaking about it and planning the next episode, and it is just colour. It's an amazing use of colour.
Yeah. And you wonder why I called one of my colours Schinkel Green. It's a wall paint. But you'll see.
Yes. And actually, in the room we're sat in right now, your walls are painted in Schinkel Green.
Yeah.
So a perfect place to do it.
It's a nod to. And next to it is another room which is in Cambrian blue. So that's a nod to two rooms next to each other which are different colours.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't done enough of this sort of thing. I wished I had time and rooms but anyway, there we are.
But we can talk about it. We've got time to talk about it, even if we don't have time to do it.
Yeah.
We can draw upon this amazing inspiration.
So that is the next episode.
That's coming next. Well, thank you very much for listening to today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes. And do ask lots of questions if you want. If we haven't covered everything. I feel like we didn't. I feel we talked about a lot, but gosh, there's so much to talk about.
Well, we've released quite a few episodes now.
Yes.
So I feel we're at the stage where for regular listeners or new listeners, please be in touch with us and ask us to sort of revisit certain things. in upcoming episodes, or if there's anything you'd like to hear more of.
Well, I mean, we could do at some point a question and answers if people start asking lots of questions. And then we could, that'd be lovely.
Or via Instagram in the meantime.
Instagram or whatever, we'll collect them all together and then we'll answer them. But that's hoping that lots of people listen to our podcast. So please continue sharing it, writing reviews, telling everybody how much you enjoy it, which we really hope you do enjoy.
We are enjoying it so much, so please subscribe. Yes, it would be great.
We love it.
We will see you next time, though. In the meantime, please follow us on Instagram, Doghead Designs and Annie Sloan's Instagram. And we look forward to Shinkle Green.
Yes. Bye.
See you.